Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Eruvin Daf Tes. We're on the bottom of Eruvin Daf Ches Amud Beis, at the last line, and we're discussing a case where a koira was suspended outside the mavi. So we have the walls of the mavi, and the koira is going across the entranceway, but instead of being on top of the entranceway, it's outside the entranceway. Rabbi tells us this koira is not kosher. We need the koira to be placed on top of the mavi to provide proper coverage. It should be properly visible. It should appear as part of the entranceway to the mavi, as part of the Pesach. Therefore, in this case, where it's outside the mavi, it's unsuitable. Says the Gemara on the bottom of Amud Beis, the last line. Eisvei Rav Adar bar Masna. So he asked the kasha from our brayso l'Rava. We have a brayso which seems to tell us that this type of koira would be kosher. Haisa koirasai mushucha. If his koira was suspended outside the mavi, oy tluya, or it was hanging. So we're speaking about a koira which wasn't long enough to reach the walls of the mavi. So we have a koira which is actually inside the entranceway, but it's not long enough to reach this wall and this wall. So it's tluya, needed to be kept up in the air with a pole to be supported. So we have two cases. Meshucha seems to indicate the type of koira we were speaking about earlier, the koira which is going across the entranceway but outside the entranceway. It's in Rosh Hashanah. And tluya is inside, but it doesn't have enough to reach the walls. Says the brayso, it depends how far away the koira is from the walls. Pachais megimel, if the gap is less than 3 tfachim, we apply the concept of a lavud, which means when we have a hole less than 3, we consider the wall as though it's glossing over that hole. That hole is not considered to be an access hole. The Gemara tells us goats can't get in there. So that little hole is considered to be closed up. So whenever we have this gap, for instance over here, the koira, which is at a distance from the mavi wall, so if the gap is merely 3 tefachim or less, then you're okay. It's as though it's connected and it's one and the same. There's no need to bring another koira. You don't need to replace this koira, which is fine. Gimel, but if the space between the koira and the walls of the mavi is 3 tefachim or more, then it doesn't work. It doesn't relate to the mavi. Tzorech lahavi koira acheres. You need to replace it with another koira. This is the shita of the chachamim that lavud must be less than 3 tefachim. Reb Shimon Gamliel holds, generally speaking, lavud is anything less than 4 tefachim. So he says, Reb Shimon Gamliel oimer pachis midalit. If the gap between the koira and the mavi is less than 4 tefachim, then you're okay. Ein tzorech lahavi koira acheres. No need to replace. Dalit, but if it's 4 tefachim or more, tzorech lahavi koira acheres, you need to replace it with another koira which will conform, which will be long enough, which will be sitting in the right place on top of the mavi. So the brayso discussed two cases: mishucha, which appear to be describing the koira which is outside of the mavi, and then we had tluya, which is the short koira which doesn't reach the walls. My love, should we not say mishucha means mibachu, it's outside the mavi, or tluya mibifnim, inside the entranceway, but merely not reaching the walls? So the Kashan Rabbu tells us that the koira outside the mavi is unsuitable. Says Allah, idivi mibifnim. Both cases are describing a koira which is actually inside the entranceway. So why mention two cases? What is meshucha and tluya? The difference is how short this koira is. Meshucha is referring to mirach achas. If this koira is coming short on one side, so it begins at wall A, it doesn't make it over to wall B. So that's pshat meshucha. It's pulled back. It's not reaching all the way. Utluya mishtei ruchos. Tluya means that the koira is very short, and it's coming up short on both sides. So what is the chiddush of the brayso? Why mention both cases? Perhaps I would think mirach achas amrin and lavud. In one direction we could say lavud, we could stretch the koira, attach it to the wall. Mishtei ruchos amrin and lavud. But to say lavud on both sides, we don't say that. The point of lavud is to take something solid and whole and stretch it a bit. But if this koira is actually short on the other side as well, so you have to stretch this side and stretch this side, you're stretching something which is really inherently incomplete. So you're applying a double lavud. Perhaps I wouldn't say that. Kamash Malan, the brayso says, no. Lavud can be applied even in this case. Rav Ashi Omar, He doesn't hold of this chiddush. He says twice lavud, no difference between one lavud and twice lavud. So apparently, the Brisa here is teaching us a different halacha, describing a different case. Mishucha vehi tluya. When the Brisa says mishucha tluya, it's merely describing the same type of case. It's a combined problem. You have a kaira which is mishucha, and there's also tluya. So mishucha means it's coming up short, and it's also suspended. Ve'echidami. What is the description of this case? Kigoin shenot shtei yisedes. For instance, that he affixed two rods, akumais, bent rods, al shnei koisli mavi, atop the two walls of the mavi. So you have the walls of the mavi, one here and one here, and on top of the koisel of the mavi, he affixed a rod. So it's an L-shaped rod. It has a vertical portion which is less than 3 tefachim. It has a horizontal portion facing inward into the entranceway, which is also less than 3 tefachim, and that's supporting the kaira. So the kaira is deficient on two accounts. Number one, it's short. It's not coming. It doesn't have the length, the required length. It's coming up short. Number two, it's suspended above the wall because the wall is here. So the kaira is both mishucha. It's pulled away from the wall. It's not reaching the wall. It's ending here. And it's also tluya because it's up in the air. So you need to extend it and bring it down. And this is happening on both sides of the kaisel. So we have shtei yisedes, two of these pegs, akumais, bent, al shnei koisli mavoi, on top of both walls of the mavi, on both sides of the entranceway, which are supporting the kaira. She'ein begoivhan gimel, the vertical portion is less than 3 tefachim, ve'im bakum misan gimel, and the horizontal portion, the bent portion, is also less than 3 tefachim. So we need to stretch this kaira and apply lavud. And we need also to apply another concept called chavoit rami. Chavoit rami means throw it down. So if we have a roof which is suspended up in the air, since that roof is hovering and covering the area, we can go ahead and bring down that roof to the required height. These two principles, which are applied to mechitzis. In this case, we need to apply both of them. We need to apply lavud to bring the kaira over to the it should be equal to the kaisel. Number two, we need to bring down on the kaisel. So lavud and chavait, do we combine both elements together? So the chiddush is yes. Perhaps I would say oy lavud amrin. You can either say lavud independently, or chavait amrin, or chavait independently. Lavud v'chavait le'amrin. But to say them and combine them and use them in tandem, perhaps we can't do that. Kamash Malon, says Rav Ashi. The Brisa is teaching us both concepts can be combined and used in tandem. So in conclusion, there's no kasha on Rava. Rava tells us that kaira cannot be placed outside the mavi. The Brisa is not allowing that. The Brisa is either speaking about a kaira which is coming up short, either coming up short on one side, on both sides, and we must apply a double lavud. According to Rav Ashi, we're speaking about this kaira which is sitting on the entranceway, but it's short and also suspended. We apply the concept of lavud and chavoit ram. Tani Rav Zakkai kamed Rav Yochanan. So Rav Zakkai presented a Brisa in front of Rav Yochanan as follows: Bein l'chayayim, alongside a lechi. Rashi explains l'chayayim, which is a lashon rabim, is a reference to the general lechi concept found all over. But the point here is, alongside a lechi, which is present at the entranceway to a mavi, so the side post affixed at the pesach of the mavi, the question is, can one be metaltal alongside that lechi? So you're not inside the mavi, you're not within the confines of the lechi, you're alongside the lechi. What about using the space underneath the kaira? So Rav Zakkai presented a brisa which said, Nidon ke karmelis. Both these areas are treated as a karmelis, as an unfenced area where a person cannot carry things around midrabanan. That was his presentation. Amar Leis, Rav Yochanan was displeased with this. He says, go outside, Tani Levara, go teach it outside the Beis Medrash. Meaning this brisa that you presented is unreliable. I disagree with it. Now, how far did he disagree? Did he disagree on Tachas HaKur and Tachas HaLechi? Or perhaps he agreed on one and on the other? You have a difference of opinion between Abaye and Rav. Abaye. Mistav and Rav Yochanan Tachas HaKur. It is logical. The opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that one can carry apparently applies under the kaira. The kaira is this beam, and it's generally, it has to be at least a tefach wide. So this area underneath the kaira is underneath something which is noticeable, and therefore one can carry under that kaira. There's no room for confusion, there's no room for mistakes. But alongside the lechi, says Abaye, certainly it would be asa to carry there. Why? As Taisus explains, there's a gzera, since a lechi can be very thin and flimsy. There's no required width. So the area, the lechi, is not so noticeable. So if you allow carrying alongside the lechi, perhaps this will lead one to actually carrying Shusar Rabbim. Since it's not such a discernible thing, the lechi is not so clear and discernible, so carrying there might lead one to carrying Shusar Rabbim. Therefore Abaye says, I agree that under the kaira you can carry, but alongside the lechi not. Rava Amar, Bei l'chayayim nami mutter. I hold that even alongside the lechi, one can carry, although it's not under this kaira, it's not under this roofed area. Nevertheless, this space alongside the lechi, despite the fact that it's not within the confines of the lechi, it's not actually within the mavi, it's alongside the lechi, it's the entranceway to the mavi. But since it's a small, insignificant area, it's called a makam petur, so it's bottled to the mavi and has the same status as the mavi. You can carry in the mavi, you can carry there as well. And it doesn't hold up this gzera that one may confuse it, which is Sarabim. He says this is fully regarded as part of the mavi. It's bottled to the mavi. Amar Rava, how did I know that one can carry there? So Rav Dimi came and he told us the name of Rav Yochanan. If you have a place, for instance, a beam, a post, a mound, in between Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, with a surface of less than 4 tefachim long and less than 4 tefachim wide. So it's an insignificantly sized area. It's called a makam petur, an exempt area, which is batal to the area which adjoins it. So this makam, which is in between the Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, both members, both people, the Rosh Hashanah person and Rosh Hashanah person, can use this post and place his item on it. Mutul of Rosh Hashanah and also of Rosh Hashanah the Katav, they can place their loads on it because it's not considered to be a transfer of Rishuyas. This place is batal to these respective Rishuyas, provided they don't swap, they don't go ahead and hand something over from the Rosh Hashanah on this side of this post to Rosh Hashanah on the other side of the post using the post. This is a Rabbanan. It shouldn't appear as though they're transferring something from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. In any case, says Rava, we see that a makim petur, a small, significantly sized area, is batal to the area which joins it. Likewise, the space alongside the lechi is batal to the mavi, and is regarded as such. Abaye will respond, Hasam begavoya gimel. They're different because this post, for instance, has some height to it. It's at least 3 tefachim in height. Therefore, it's something visible and discernible. There's no room for confusion, as opposed to the space alongside the lechi, which is on the ground. It's less than 3 tefachim. So although it's a small area in size, but there's a gzera that perhaps if you allow there, one won't differentiate between carrying the air and carrying Shusar Rabbim. Therefore I maintain that one may not carry alongside the lechi. Amar Abaye ben Aminillah, how do I know this halach? The Amar of Chama bar Guri Amarav, Toicha Pesach, the area within the entranceway. For instance, we have the walls of the mavi extending and heading to Rosh Hashanah, and then at the entranceway there's a bend in the wall, so they partially block that side and create an entranceway. So between these two bends is the Pesach. That's called Toicha Pesach. So this area, this Toicha Pesach, is considered to be alongside the lechi because these bends in the wall are considered like a lechi. So alongside the Pesach, within the space of the Pesach, that's called alongside the lechi. Says Rav Chama bar Gurya name of Rav, you cannot carry there. Toicha Pesach tzorech lechi acher latira. In order to carry there, you must place another lechi at the outer surface of this entranceway in order to provide coverage to the area within, to allow carrying within that Pesach. But if you're going to rely merely on these walls, which are forming the sides of that entranceway, you're going to rely on them as a lechi. You cannot carry in this gap, in this area between these walls, which are the Pesach, because it's alongside the lechi. So tzorich Pesach tzorich lechi achelatir. You need an additional lechi. So apparently, you may not carry alongside the lechi. V'chi, perhaps you'll say, I'm speaking about a case, the isbei dal dalit, that area is large and significant. It's covering an area of 4 tefachim long, 4 tefachim wide, in which case it's considered to be a carmelis, an unfenced area which is midrabanan. One may not carry throughout the carmelis. So that's why it's asa. But generally speaking, if it's a small, insignificant area, it's batal to the mavi like Rava. Are you going to say that? No. Va'amar Rav Chanan. Ba'Rava Amar Rav. Toicha Pesach, inside this entranceway, aval b'shi einboy dal. Even if there's no dal, it's a small, insignificant area. It's a makam p'tur. Sorech lechi achelatiri. In order to carry that, you must place another lechi. So apparently, alongside the original entranceway, which is the lechi, one may not carry. So I have a raya to my shit. Rava will respond, Hasam da pasuch lekarmelis. So Rava responded that it's different over there because the mavi is open to a carmelis, and therefore the space in the entranceway cannot connect to the mavi. Rather, it actually connects to the carmelis, which is outside the entranceway to the mavi. Says the Gemara, Avalush Sarabim. My shari. But you're going to say that if the mavi is heading into Sarabim, then you allow carrying that small, significant entranceway area, despite the fact that it's open to Sarabim. Can that be so? Can a Rabim be better than a Carmelis? It's open to a Rabim, which is a Rosh Hashanah Torah. Yetziva be'ara. Are you going to say the citizen is down on the floor? The Giyor and the newcomer b'Shmei Shemai is up in the sky. He's accorded great honors. It's meant to be in the reverse, meaning, how can you say that when it's open to a Carmelis, which is merely Shis Rabbanon, then that causes the entranceway to be Asur B'Tiltal? Whereas if it's open to Rosh Hashanah, where it's a Rosh Hashanah Torah, then you may use that entranceway despite the fact that it's broadly open to the Rosh Hashanah. How can you say that? It's meant to be in the reverse. It says more in, yes. Motza minas mina v'neir. When two things are like-minded, they are of the same type, they reinforce each other, they connect each other. So in this case where there's a Carmelis right outside the Mavi, the space within the entranceway, which is technically, it's not a Mavi, it's not a part of the Mavi, it's not enclosed in the Mavi, so it doesn't have that proper enclosure. It's like a Carmelis. But since it's a small area, we regard it as a Makam Tur. But once there's a Carmelis running alongside the entranceway, that small area connects itself. It gets chizuk from the Carmelis outside. It joins it. It joins forces with the Carmelis and is regarded like a Carmelis as well. So that's why when it's open to a Carmelis, one may not use that entranceway, even though it's alongside the Lechi. As opposed to where it's open to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is an entirely different category of an area. This entranceway doesn't relate to it. It's a different min. So rather than connecting to the Rosh Hashanah, the entranceway turns inward and is batal to the Mavi. And one can carry in this entranceway. So in summary, when we have a space which is alongside a Lechi, so if this entranceway is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, all agree, one cannot carry there. Has the din of a Carmelis. But if it's less than 4 tefachim in dimension, and it's 3 tefachim high, all agree that it's mutter to carry. That's a makam tur, and it's batal to the adjoining areas. When we have an area which is less than 4 tefachim in dimension, but it is less than 3 tefachim in height, then it depends. If it's open to a Carmelis, then all agree that area is considered a Carmelis. As the Gemara said, Motza minas minoi. One min found the other min, meaning two things that are the same min. Min es minoi v'neir, and he wakes him up. He reinforces him. He connects to him. And we regard that entranceway as a Carmelis. When it's open to Rosh Hashanah, then we have machlokes. According to Rav, it's mutter, because this space is batal to the Mavi. According to Abai, it's asur, because any area alongside a Lechi might arouse confusion, and therefore one may not carry there. Continues the Gemara. Amalei Rav Huna Brei Rav Yishua Rav. Va'adloi tisbra. Do you not hold the ben lechayayin aser, that alongside a lechi, one may not carry? Va'amar Rabbi Rachan Rav Yochanan, mavoi shert safa b'lechayayin. So a person affixed several lechis. The chayayin is lashon rabbi of lechis. He affixed several lechis at the entranceway to his mavoi. Pachos midalet, leaving a space of less than 4 tvachim in between the lechis. So you have the wall of the mavoi which is heading to his rabbim. His fellow placed a lechi and another lechi and another lechi, spacing them less than 4 tvachim apart. Says the Gemara, Banu la machlokes, Rab Shimon Gamliel Rabbanan. This will result in a machlokes between these two shittas. Explains the Gemara. Rab Shimon Gamliel the Amar, who says Amrina Lavad, that when two things are spaced less than 4 tvachim apart, we connect the two things. So in this case, these lechis are spaced less than 4 tvachim apart. We connect them, and therefore we regard them as one continuous lechi. It's like one big unit. All these lechis are as though they're connected with each other, considered one continuous lechi. And since you cannot use the area alongside a lechi, so you can only use the mavoi up until the inner lechi. It's all considered to be one lechi. So only until the inner corner of the inner lechi. Mishtamish ad chudi apnimi, you can only use up until the corner, the inner corner shel lechi apnimi of the inner lechi. L'Rabbanan de Amri lo yamrin lovet. However, according to Rabbanan, they don't regard lovet in this case because the lechis were more than 3 tvachim apart. They were spaced less than 4 tvachim apart, but there's 3 between them. So each lechi is a separate entity. So according to Rabbanan, he can use the mavoi up until the farthermost lechi, until the first lechi, which he considered as his lechi. So up until there he can use, which is the chudei apnimi of the lechi hachitzen, of the exterior lechi. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan de Amri, who say lo yamrina lovet, we don't apply lovet in this case. In which case, each lechi is considered independently. Mishtamish at chudei apnimi shel chitzen. He can use the area of the mavi until he gets to the outer lechi. The chudei apnimi means the inner corner of that lechi. It means up until the beginning of that lechi. Apparently, alongside a lechi, all agree one may not use. Abo bein lechayayin kol yam yasu. So it's a kashan Rava. Says Rava will respond. He actually did respond. He answered the kasha that Rav Huna asked him. Hasam nami de pasuach lekarmelis. There as well, we are speaking where the mavi is open to a karmelis, and therefore the space alongside the lechi is bottled to the karmelis, and is regarded as such, and therefore we cannot carry there. But if it's open to Rishus Harabim, there's no concern because it's bottled inward to the mavi. Aval Rishus Harabim, my shari is going to be mutter. How can you say that Yitziva Ba'ara, the citizen down on the ground, the Giyoyer, which is merely a karmelis, B'shmei Shemaya? In, says the Gemara, Matzah Minas Minai. Two things that are of the same min, they greet each other, they meet each other, Veneer, and they wake each other up, meaning they reinforce each other. And the space inside the entrance of the mavi, the space alongside the lechi, which is an unfenced area like a karmelis, will connect to the karmelis which is lying right outside the mavi, and therefore it will be regarded as a karmelis. Continues the Gemara. Rav Ashi Amar, he says no. Certainly all agree that the space along a lechi can be used. He explains the halacha that we just mentioned, which is actually halacha in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, with the several lechis which were attached to the mavi. He explains it and describes it as follows. So he went ahead and he attached lechis, leaving a space in between the lechis, a gap less than 4 tefachim. B'meshech arba amos. So this is what Rav Ashi is adding, that the total length of all these lechis and the space between them, the total length combined is 4 amos. Now we know that a lechi, which is 4 amos, is not considered a lechi. We regard it as a kaisel of the mavi because a shiur of a mavi, the minimum shiur of a mavi is 4 amos. So when we have a lechi that size, it is treated like a wall of a mavi because it encompasses the size of a mavi. It is no longer regarded as a lechi. So in this case, where all these lechis combined will total 4 amos, this will be dependent on the machlokes between Rav Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan. Why? Because according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, that these lechis, which are spaced less than 4 tefachim apart, are combined with each other, which results in a very large size lechi, 4 amma lechi. So this lechi is null and void. Says the Gemara, Rav Shimon Gamliel, the Amar Rabbanan Lavud, Havale Mavi. It's not a lechi. It's regarded like a mavi, like a wall of a mavi, and therefore it's useless. V'tzorech lechi achlatiri. One needs to affix another lechi to permit carrying the mavi. However, Rabbanan the Amri, who say that in this case where there is a space in between these lechi, which has 3 tefachim, lo yamrinu lavud, we don't apply lavud in this case, because greater than 3 does not allow lavud. In which case we treat each lechi independently. There's no connection between the lechis. So the lechi is merely a narrow lechi. It's not a 4 amma lechi. So it's fine and dandy. It helps the mavi. And one can carry the mavi. Therefore, no more lechi is required to allow carrying in the mavi. But certainly when it comes to carrying alongside a mavi, there's no discussion here regarding that halacha. Perhaps one may carry alongside a lechi, like Rava. Says Gemara Kasha. We just said that according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, who applies lavud in this case, this results in creating a very large size lechi, 4 amas in length, which is no longer useful as a lechi. It appears like a mavi wall. Says the Gemara, however, we have some difficulty, because let's assume that this was affixed like a typical lechi. Rashi describes your typical lechi was actually protruding a bit into Rosh Hashanah to make it more discernible and visible, to provide adequate separation. So the typical lechi was actually sticking out of the mavi. So the kasha here is fine. From within the mavi, this large size lechi, this form of lechi, is not reckoned with. It appears like part of the mavi. So halachically we don't regard it as a lechi. But ignore that part. What about the small piece that's extending into Rosh Hashanah, that's protruding from the mavi, which is certainly visible from the outside, meaning the onlooker facing the mavi, to him it looks like a perfect lechi. Look at this piece sticking out in Rosh Hashanah. So since it's discernible from the outside, despite the fact that it's not really visible from the inside, and inside it's merely part of that mavi wall, but from the outside, it appears like a proper lechi. So the fact that a lechi is visible properly from the outside, why can't that benefit the mavi as well? Why can't that create adequate separation? The person looking at the mavi sees, whoa, it's a separate area, look at that lechi. So he detaches himself, so to speak, from the mavi, which results in the mavi being detached from Rosh Hashanah. So despite the fact that it's not visible from the inside, why can't this help? Says Rav Shimon Gamliel, who says that due to lava, this is a large size lechi, and from the inside of the mavi, it looks like part of the mavi, like a mavi wall, and therefore it can't serve as a lechi. But since it's visible from the outside, because it's protruding a bit, let it be like the halacha, where a lechi, which is visible from the outside, and it is not visible from the inside. So this is going to be discussed soon. Cases where a person places his lechi in a manner where it's visible from the outside, but not from the inside. And inside the mavi, it seems merely like part of the wall. It's shove, it's flush with the wall. So it's visible outside, not inside. Likewise, in this case, it's a similar type of situation. Inside the mavi, it doesn't appear like a lechi. It's this large size lechi which appears like a wall, but from the outside, there's a bit protruding. There's something sticking out just around him. That should provide adequate lechi coverage. Answers the Gemara. Midihu time. Ela Rav Yochanan. Isn't this whole discussion with regards to Rabbi Yochanan Shita? He was the author of this halacha of the multiple lechis. So relating to him, now he doesn't hold that a lechi can be constructed in this manner. When a lechi which is merely visible on the outside, not on the inside, it doesn't work. Haki also Ravin. When Ravin came, Amar Rav Yochanan, he said name Rav Yochanan, Nirim Bachutz. When something is visible on the outside, Vishavim Mefnim, and on the inside, Einei Nidim Shel Lechi. We don't treat it like a lechi. Therefore, in our case, it won't work. Apparently, he holds that a lechi needs to be visible inside. It's meant to provide that containment, to enclose the area within the mavi, to make it separate from Rosh Hashanah. So it's meant to be visible on the inside, strictly on the inside. If it's not visible on the inside, It won't help us much. Just because it's visible on the outside, it won't have a din of a lechi. Continues the Gemara on the same topic. Itma we learned. Nira mifnim v'shavim machutz. What about an opposite situation? You have something which is visible on the inside and not on the outside. So the lechi is facing into the entranceway of the mavi. In which case, when you're standing in the mavi, looking out to Shesram, you see something protruding. You see a lechi there. But one who's standing outside, looking at the mavi, to him, that lechi, so to speak, merely appears like a thicker wall. It doesn't appear like a protrusion. It doesn't appear like something sticking out, like it's a lechi. So here we have a case where it's nira mibifnim. It is visible from the inside, v'shav machutz, but from the outside it merely appears flush as part of the ordinary wall. It doesn't appear like a lechi. Nevertheless, this has a din of a lechi. We treat it as such because it's visible from the inside, which is the main determinant. What about a reverse situation? Nira mi bachutz, the lechi is visible clearly from the outside. V'shav mibifnim, but one who's standing inside doesn't notice it because the wall is straight and even. So we have a piece of the wall which is sticking out into Shesarabim, so that protrusion is actually thinner than the typical wall behind it. So it's thinner than the wall, but it is only on the inner portion of that wall. So one who's standing outside facing the mavi notices that lechi. It's near in bachutz, but one who's standing inside, to him it merely appears like an extension of the wall. It doesn't appear like a lechi. So that's the shaila. When something is visible outside, not inside, can it be applied to create separation even for the mavi? The mere fact that the person outside feels separated, is that adequate separation? We have machlekes. Rav Chia Rav Shimon Rebbe, between Rav Chia and Rav Shimon Rebbe. Chadamar one said nida mishum lechi, even when it's only visible outside it works. V'chadamar einoi nida mishum lechi, it doesn't work because it needs to be visible inside. But we aren't sure who said what. Was it Rav Chia or Rav Shimon Rebbe? Says the Gemara Tistayim. Let's conclude. The Rav Chia who the Amar nida mishum lechi. You can have a raya. Now Rav Chia was the one that says when something is visible merely outside, that is enough to provide coverage to be considered a lech. The Tanur Rav Chia learned this brayso. So we have a wall which narrows. So a portion of the wall narrowed, it shrunk. So one side of the wall is narrower than the other side of the wall. Now, this can happen in two ways. The shrink of the wall, which actually creates a protrusion, because when the wall shrinks, so the wider portion seems to be sticking out, which can serve as a lechi. So sometimes it can be visible outside and not inside, and sometimes in the reverse. Bein shenira mi bachutz v'shav mifnim, whether we have a case where the wall narrows, so it's the inner portion of the wall which narrowed at the entranceway to the mavi, in which case the narrowed part is visible from the outside, meaning when you're looking at the mavi, you see the tip of that wall, which is narrowing. It appears like a lechi, but it's shavim b'fnim. When you stand inside the mavi, you don't notice that narrow part of the wall. So that's one example. Ubein, or in the case shenira mibifnim v'shavim mechutz, you have the wall narrowing in the inside of the mavi. So the inner portion of that wall shrunk, which created a protrusion as you head along to the outside of the mavi, towards the entrance, so you see the wall widening. So that's considered to be nira b'fnim. That lechi is apparent from inside the mavi, but it's not visible from the outside. V'shavim machutz, because one standing outside, to him this wall merely appears like a thick wall. In either case, whether it's visible from the inside and not on the outside, whether even when it's only visible from the outside, nida in mishum lechi, it is treated like a lechi. This time, okay, so you can have a raya from here. The Rav Chia, who's the one who taught us brayso, holds that even if it's only visible on the outside, it works. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. Rabbi Yochanan miloi shmieli, we learned earlier that Rabbi Yochanan holds that if it's only visible outside, it doesn't work. Do you think he didn't hear of this brayso? Miloi shmieli ha, ela shmieli. Certainly he heard the brayso, but he doesn't agree with it. Likewise, Rav Chia nami, lo savarla. Although he taught it, Perhaps he doesn't agree with it. How do you know that Rav Chia subscribes to this shita? He says, how could you compare? Rabbi Yochanan certainly doesn't hold of this halacha. That's why he didn't learn it, he didn't teach it. But Rabbi Chia, if you hold that he doesn't agree with it, he holds that when something is merely visible from the outside, it cannot be applied to the mavi. Why is he learning it? Why is he teaching it? Apparently he holds that something is merely visible from the outside is sufficient. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rabba Barav Huna Nira mebachutz v'shavim b'fnim nida mishum lechi. So he taught name of Huna that something which is merely visible from the outside is effective. Amar Rabba umasvina shmaitin. We asked the kasha on this halacha that was taught by Rav Huna. We asked the kasha on it from the Mishnah, which seems to indicate that something which is merely visible on the outside could not be applied to the inside. The Mishnah says, Chotzer Ktana, Shenifratz L'Gdoila, a small courtyard, which was breached to the larger courtyard. So we have a large Chotzer, which adjoins a small Chotzer, and the small Chotzer's wall is missing. Gdoila Muteres Uktana Asura. The result is that one may carry in the Gdoila, and not in the Ktana. Why? Because since the Gdoila is overlapping the Ktana, it's enveloping the Ktana, it's coming around the Ktana, as we see in the picture on Rashi, in the bottom right corner. So you have the Chatzer Ktana next to the Chatzer Gdoila, and the Chatzer Gdoila is actually larger than the Chatzer Ktana. So that overlap on both sides of the breach, where the Ktana comes into the Gdoila, creates an entranceway, creates a Pesach here for the Gdoila. So on his end of things, this pirza is not a pirza. For the Ktana it is, because he lost his entire wall. When one stands inside the Ktana, what does he see? He sees nothing. He sees empty space. His entire wall was breached to the Gdoila. He's completely enmeshed, blended into the Gdoila. Therefore, he needs the Erev Chatzeris to make an Erev together with the residents of the Gdoila to allow carrying within the Chatzer Ktana. But for the Gdoila's purpose, this is considered to be a separate entity. Because from his perspective, that overlap, those walls alongside, on the right and left of the pirza, of the Ktana, as far as he's concerned, are considered to be making a Pesach for him. His entire wall is not missing. He has two portions of wall remaining. Therefore, for the Gdoila, it's considered a Pesach. And therefore, he does not need to join an Erev with the Ktana. He can carry regardless. So, Gdoila Muteres Uktana Masura Mepnei Sheike Pischa Shegdoila. Because this entry point between the Ktana and Gdoila is regarded as the Pesach of the Gdoila due to the overlapping walls. Now let's analyze this. The overlapping walls are effective for the Gdoila. Why not for the Ktana? If something which is visible from the outside of the Mavi or outside of the Chatzar can be applied inward, can benefit even the area within, it doesn't necessarily see it. So why in this case don't the overlapping walls of the Gdoila assist the Ktana as well? Let's consider this meeting point between the Ktana and Gdoila as a Pesach, not only for the Gdoila, but for the Ktana as well, because the Pesach is visible mibachutz, outside of the Ktana. V'isa, if you hold that the exterior visibility provides coverage within, for the area within, Ktana nami tishtari. So the Chatzer Ktana should also be mutter. B'nirim b'chutzer shavim b'fnim. By applying this concept, because the Pesach is visible outside the Ktana. Let that form as a separating factor. Let that serve as a Pesach between the Ktana and the Gdoila. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Zera, merely for technical reasons, we can't apply this concept. Because the story was that the Ktana was actually entering the Gdoila. The walls of the Ktana were actually protruding, extending into the area of the Gdoila. In which case the overlapping walls of the Gdoila are too far. They're too far removed from the pirza, which is inside the area of the Gdoila. Therefore, those overlapping portions cannot constitute a Pesach for the Chatzer Ktana. They're too far away from the breach. But generally speaking, certainly when we have a proper case of Nira B'chutz, such as in the cases mentioned earlier when you have the lech, which is visible on the outside, which is situated at the entranceway to the mavi, the fact that it's visible outside is enough. Says, well, okay, it's too far away. Why don't we apply the concept of love it and permit it? Meaning, although the walls of the Ktana are extending into the Gdoila, let's go ahead and erase the gap which is between those extensions, those walls, between those walls and the walls to the right and left of it. The walls of the Chatzah Gdoila, which are heading in the same direction. Why don't we just connect these two walls, erase that gap in between them to the concept of Lavud? Now, we're going to have a properly formed Pesach. We're going to have, it's as though we're going to have gaps. We're going to have pieces of overlapping walls on both sides of that entranceway. So this is described in the picture in Rashi on bottom, on the second from the right. So Rashi describes the Lavud there, meaning the space in between the extending walls of the Ktana will be connected with the walls of the Gdoila to the right and left of it. And once we fill that gap, we have a Pesach there. We fill the area, it's as though it's built up. That should form as an entranceway for the Ktana. And since it's visible outside, meaning it's visible bachutz, it should help and be effective for the Ktana, allow carrying within it, because it's a Pesach here. It's not a pirza, it appears like a doorway. So v'leima love it, let's apply love it to Tishri and let the Chatzah Ktana be mutter. Says the Gemara, perhaps it's too large for love it. The distance between the walls of the Ktana and the walls to the right and left are too far, too distant, too large, and you can't go ahead and connect them. It's larger than 3 tefachim. But that's not the case. V'atani Rav Ada bar Avimi. He taught a brayso Kamei Rav Chanina, how large were these courtyards? So he said as follows: Ktana be'eser. The small one was 10 amos wide. Gedola b'chasesrei. The gadol wasn't really so big. It was merely 11 amos wide. It was 1 amma wider than the Ktana. An amma 6 tefachim. Let's assume that extra amma was split evenly on both sides, which results in lavut being applied, because you have the walls of the Ktana which are entering the Gdoila, and on either side you merely have 3 tefachim. It's really less than 3 tefachim, because the thickness of the wall of the Ktana is also deducting from that 3 tefachim. So this results in a gap of less than 3 tefachim between those walls and the walls of the Chatzah Gdoila which are beside them, to the right and left. So once you fill that gap, it appears like it's built up and it's an entranceway. Says the Gemara, actually, the extra amma that the Gdoila overlapped wasn't split evenly, it wasn't cut evenly, 3 on this side and 3 on that side. It was actually 4 tefachim on this side and 2 on the other. If you have 4 tefachim, that's larger than Lavut. Amar Avina b'meflogen mekaisel ze b'shnayim. Apparently, the walls of the Chatzah Ktana which are extending to the Gdoila are situated in such a manner. On one side, there's a gap of merely 2 tefachim between the walls of the Chatzah Ktana and the walls of the Chatzah Gdoila which are beside them. On the other side, there's a gap of 4 tefachim between them, which does not allow lavut. Says the Gemara, but on one side you can apply lavut. On the side that merely has a gap of 2 tefachim, why can we apply lavut at least on one side? And this will make the Chatzah Ktana mutter betiltal. Why? Because since we apply lavut on one side of that pirza, it is no longer regarded as a pirza, regarded as a pesach, due to the fact that there's an overlapping wall. There's a wall built right next to that opening. Says the Gemara, one side is not enough. Says the Gemara, Rebbe, we're following Rebbe's shita that requires both sides. He needs wall remnants to be present on both sides of the pirza to make it into a pesach. Rebbe, the Amar, who said, we need 2 pasen. A pas is a board. So you need a board on either side to remove the pirza status and give it a pesach status. The Sanya, as we learned, chatzah niteres b'pas echad. A chatzah merely needs 1 pas. So a chatzah, for instance, that was breached into Rishus Rabbim, it's missing its wall. You cannot carry in that chatzah provided that it's completely open. But if you place something to partially enclose it, you place a board, a pas, alongside that pirza, at least on one side, then it turns it into a pesach. Rebbe Mishnei pasen. We need a board on either side. So we see that you need to adjust both sides of the pirza to turn it into a Pesach. Likewise, in our case, we need something on both sides of the Pirza to turn into a Pesach. But in this case, since we only have something on one side, that won't turn into a Pesach. Says the Gemara, how can you have this approach? Meaning, according to this approach, certainly if something is visible from the outside, nirim and bachutz, that's enough. Why then is the chatzak tana asur? Due to technical reasons, due to the particular configuration of these two chatzeris with each other. The small one is actually extending itself into the Gdoila, and is too far removed from those overlapping walls. Lava cannot apply due to the fact that the walls are situated at a distance from each other. Now, we said, there was a brayso that told us the dimensions of the Gdoila is 11 amas wide, as opposed to the Ktana, which is merely 10 amas wide. So the Gdoila was an amma wider than the Ktana. The Gemara is going to challenge. Why did we pick that number 11? According to your approach, it wouldn't have been better if the Chatzak Gdoila would have been much larger, 100 amas wide, which would explain why, for instance, Lavat can't be applied, because it's too wide. The distance between the walls of the Ketana, which are extending into the Gdoila, and the walls of the Gdoila is too wide. It's too great an area to apply Lavat. So why did we choose the number 11? Which leads to confusion, perhaps. We had a kasha, it's only 11, meaning it's only 6 tfachim wider than the small one. So let's split it up, 3 and 3, let's make love. We had a kasha, we had a teretz, no, it's 4 and 2. It leads to confusion. Why did we specifically choose the number 11? Which doesn't really have a purpose here. So it seems to be a bit difficult, according to your approach. So apparently, the correct approach is that indeed, when something is visible from the outside, it is not effective for the inside. So the Chatzak Tana certainly had no chance of being mutter, because the fact that there are overlapping walls on the side of the Chatzak Gdoila don't benefit the Tana whatsoever, because it's merely near bachutz, not visible from the inside. That explains why the brayso told us that the Gdoila was 11 amas wide. Explains the Gemara. How could you have this approach? It all works well if you say nirim and bachutz v'shavim mifnim eino nidim shum lechi. When something is merely visible from the outside and not from the inside, it will not be regarded as a lechi. Likewise, in this case, we have these overlapping walls of the Chatzak Gdoila, they won't be applied to the Chatzak Tana. For Rebbe Savalak Rabbi Yosi, and Rebbe, that we just mentioned, who requires the walls on either side, he requires 2 pasin, and requires 2 remnants, 2 overlapping walls on either side of a pirza to be considered a Pesach. He holds like Rabbi Yosi, who holds that, you know how wide this overlap needs to be? This remnant, this pas, needs to be at least 3 tefachim wide. It needs to have some significance. So if Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yosi, now we understand why the Gdoila needs to be 11 amas wide, because you need to split it evenly, 3 tefachim on each side, because 11 amas means it's 1 amar wider than the Chatzak Tana, which gives us an extra amma, which is 6 tefachim, 3 tefachim on either side, to provide the proper enclosure for the Gdoila, because we need a pass of 3 tefachim on either side, because Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yosi. That explains things. Udur Rab Zera, Udur Ravina Lessa, and this whole discussion where Rab Zera told us that the Chatzak Tana is actually extending into the Gdoila, that explains why the Chatzak Tana is Aser. And the Ravino told us that it's 4 and 2 less, so we disregard that. We don't reckon with that. We don't apply that. That will explain why the brayso specifically described the Tana as being 10 amas in width, and the Gdoila 11 amas wide. It's strictly for this reason, to allow the Gdoila to carry within it. Meaning, this requirement is for the Gdoila, to allow the Gdoila to carry. You need that extra space. You need an amma to be split into 2, 3 tefachim on either side to provide adequate overlap, to allow carrying the Gdoila, to make this into a Pesach. So this works well according to this approach. That certainly the Ketana would never be mutter, because something which is visible from the outside doesn't provide coverage for the inside. And we don't need all these descriptions that we discussed earlier, that the Ketana is entering the Gdoila, and that there is 4 on one side, 2 on the other. This is not applicable, because the Ketana in either case would be Asr. The reason why the Gdoila needed to be 11 amas wide, because that extra amma split into two gives us 3 tefachim on each side for the overlap, which is required to allow carrying the gedolah. Eloi amras nira v'chutz v'shavim v'bifnim. According to you, that's something which is visible from the outside. For instance, this Pesach configuration, which is visible from the outside of the Chatzak Tana. V'shavim v'bifnim, although it's not visible from the inside, neither mishum lechi. We'll have halacha like a lechi, and likewise in this case, we regard it as a Pesach. And the Tana technically can make use of the overlapping walls, despite the fact that it's not visible inside in the Chatzak Tana. Why then can't you carry the Tana? Udur Rab Zera, Udur Ravin Issa, it's due to Rab Zera Ravina, who told us that it's due to the specific configuration here, which precludes carrying the Tana. Rav Zera said that the Kaisel and Tana are entering the Gadol and they're too far away from those overlapping walls. Ravina, who told us it's far on one side to the other. Issa, we subscribe to that. And Rabbi does not subscribe to Rabbi Yossi. He doesn't require the pas to be 3 tefachim wide, just as you had told me, because we said that the gap on one side is merely 2 tefachim wide. So the overlap wall there is merely 2 tefachim. So apparently Rabbi does not hold like Rabbi Yossi. So according to that approach, we have one thing difficult. Gedola ba'achas Yisrael lamali. Why was the Chatzak Gedola described as being 11 amas wide? Either way it's difficult. The number seems to be difficult. If the point was to explain why the Chatzak Gedola is mutter, to the fact that it's wider than the Tana, has overlapping walls to create a Pesach. Why the number 11? Be'eser ushtei tefachim sageh. It would be enough if it's only 10 amas plus 2 tefachim, meaning it overlaps the Chatzak Tana just a bit, which provides some overlap. Because we don't need the overlap to be 3 tefachim, so 10 amas and 2 tefachim is enough. If the point being made here is to explain why the Chatzak Tana is Asr, and that's because the Chatzak Gedola is greater than it overlaps, it's bigger, and eliminates the concept of Lavut. If that's the reason why we mentioned the number 11, let the Brisa describe the Chatzak Gedola as being very, very large, much greater than the small one. 50 amas in width, 100 amas. And that will explain why there's no Lavut. Why mention the number 11, which leads to confusion? It led us to ask a kasha, if it's only 1 amma wider than the Tana, which is 6 tefachim, let's split up the 3 tefachim on either side and make lava. That creates problems. Why mention the number 11? Be safe. Mention number 50, 100, which will explain why there's no Lavut, why you can't carry the Tana. Elo lav shmamina. Apparently we have a right from here that your approach is incorrect. And in reality, nira mebachutz, v'shavim mebifnim, or something is only visible on the outside, eino nidim mishum lechi, it cannot be considered like a lechi. And in this case, it cannot be considered like a Pesach shmamina. Indeed, this is a right. Because this will explain why we specifically chose the number 11. The Chatzak Tana, there's no chance of tiltal there. There's no Pesach there. It was regarding the Chatzak Gedola. To explain why carrying the Gedola, because it has a Pesach. Why does it have a Pesach? Because it's an amma wider than the Chatzak Tana, which creates overlaps. And since an amma is 6 tefachim, so each overlap was 3 tefachim, which is a prescribed shiur for a pas, that explains why one can carry in the Chatzak Gedola. Okay, brief chazara of today's shiur. We began with the kaira, which is placed outside the mavi. That's puzzle. If the kaira runs short, doesn't reach the wall, but it's placed within the entrance, then we can apply lavut. We can even apply lavut on both sides. And also, if it's suspended above the entrance, we can apply chavoit, bring it down to the kaisel. We discussed the halacha of carrying alongside the lechi. So we said as follows: if that space is large, it's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, that's considered like a carmelis. What if it's smaller than 4 tefachim, and it's 3 tefachim in height? All agree it's a makam p'tur, it's batal to mavi, you can carry there. If it's an area less than 4 tefachim, but it's not 3 tefachim in height, then it depends. If it's open to a carmelis, all agree it's usher to carry there, it connects to the carmelis. If it's open to Rosh Hashanah, then we have machlekes. According to Rava, it's mutter because it's batal to the mavi. Now Abai seems to hold in principle like Rava, but he holds we can't allow him to carry there. There's a gzeira. If he carries alongside this thin, insignificant lechi, this might lead to confusion and to carrying in Rosh Hashanah as well. We concluded that if something is visible, maybe fnim, for instance, the lechi, which is visible from within the mavi, or the Pesach from within the Chatzar. That is the primary determinant. So if it's visible within the contained area, it works, even though it's not visible from the outside. But in the reverse situation, if something is nira b'chutz, is visible from the outside and not from within, then we have a machlekes.